So one of the primary storylines here at the 2022 Reese's Senior Bowl is this battle royale for QB1. And each one of the quarterbacks here was hoping to state their case. And what we want to do now is kind of sit down and look at where we predictively have had these guys, right, and then talk about on the exit interview, which is what this is, where we're changing those projections for these quarterbacks based on the things that they showcased here in Mobile. So our own grades are going to change when we go through the cross-check process, but this is more for the draft simulator and understanding, when people run mock drafts, what order we're predicting these guys are going to come off the board and what the information we collected this week is going to do to change that. Right. So we're going to start with Sam Howell. Joe, you want to go ahead and give me measurements for him on where he came in this week?
6'002", 221 pounds, 9 1/8 for his hand size, 31 1/8 for his arm.
Okay, so Sam coming into the week, we had 50th on the predicted board. I know he was fairly consistent as far as the things he did well and the things that he didn't do well. I think the questions for him are going to be more about the offense that he played in and how quickly he can convince teams that he can run things that have more depth to them than what he ran at North Carolina.
Right. I think that's a big point. And then I also think about, too, an element of Sam Howell's game is also his legs. Yeah. And this was an environment to where he, wasn't running the football. So I think that we kind of took something away from him. So just, I think in a game and, in a different setting, you go back and watch the film, I think you see a good football player, right? But it's just this just kind of was highlighting what he isn't great at. And I think that's why you kind of seen him just be steady to where he made some throws, he made some good throws, but he doesn't have an arm that'll wow you.
I thought maybe he doesn't have an arm that's going to wow you like an elite caliber arm, but for anyone that had questions about his ability to drive the football, I feel like this was a good showcase for him in that regard. And so if there's something that he did to help himself, I do think it was showing the velocity on some of those outbreaking patterns. We knew he had the deep ball, but right, the getting some zip on the ball was something I thought he showed.
So Sam, where do we feel like teams are going to come out of this environment from a personality perspective? Because Joe, I know you've been around him a couple times, and that's an observation that he's a little bit non-traditional as far as his personality.
So I've had a lot of different exposures to Sam Howell, and I wouldn't say that he has red flags in terms of him being a loose cannon or anything like that. It's just that he doesn't necessarily strike you as a guy with a lot of charisma and a lot of energy. And so when you think about your quarterback kind of being one of the most influential leaders on your team, regardless of how good of a player he is, I feel like you just want a little bit more of a guy that screams somebody that people would gravitate towards, and I don't know that you necessarily get that vibe from Sam.
So predictively, I don't know that he's necessarily done anything to influence a move up or down, but I do think it's an important disclaimer that the way with the draft simulator works, him at 50, he's not going at 50. No. Like he's probably a back end of first round, early second round pick because of the prioritization in the simulator of that position. Mm-hmm. So if I gave you the number 50, that might paint one picture, but if I say, hey, this is back end of round 1, top 10 picks of round 2, we kind of like where we're working with there?
I think that's accurate.
Okay. So we're going to leave him status quo. Joe, our next quarterback is Kenny Pickett, quarterback, Pittsburgh.
6'0", for his height, 217 for his weight, hand size.
Question mark?
I'm guessing they're not very big. And 30 5/8 for the arms.
We had Kenny 18th coming into this week on the predictive board, and that is good from a simulation perspective. You're sometimes QB1, sometimes QB2. You're in that 9 through 8, 9, 12, 15 ballpark. So,
well, I think that's a good range for Kenny. I think with Carolina being at 6, I'd like to make sure that was a possibility for them. I think there's another quarterback we'll get to that I think has entered the chat, if you will. But I think as long as he's in that range and has the possibility of being QB1 or QB2, I think predictively that makes a lot of sense for me.
He is QB2, one spot behind Matt Corral, as things currently stand, who, hey, might have been a big winner this week, right? By not staying in neutral, right? It's just kind of letting the rest of the pack kind of showcase they are what we thought they were. So anything else on Kenny Pickett? Status quo. Gave us what we thought.
Yeah.
I guess the disappointing thing is that he didn't necessarily come in here and say, I am QB1. Right? He had a fine week.
Yeah.
But as, you know, one of the big conversations that we've had coming into this week was, what can these players do to separate themselves and really give you that motivation to say, this is the guy? Kenny didn't do that.
No. Yeah, I think that I leave out of here. Well, coming in here, we were wondering if this can be a Joe Burrow, leader of the franchise, face of the franchise type quarterback. I leave here thinking, okay, this may be Jay Cutler, Derek Carr, just those type of quarterbacks to where they have to be in, a scheme-specific situation, and they'll never be the top 5 quarterback in the NFL. That's how I'm leaving here feeling like.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable expectations to have. And the thing about that is there's only 5 of them, right? It's a pretty exclusive club. Well, let's shift gears here. Desmond Ritter, quarterback, Cincinnati.
6'0", 207 pounds, 10 on the dot, 32 7/8 for the arm.
Okay, so we had Desmond 40th, so we had him ahead of Sam coming into the week. And I think the important thing here from a notes perspective is we also had him as QB5 overall. He was behind Willis and Strong from this Senior Bowl group, who we're all going to talk about collectively. But Desmond Ritter coming into the week as QB5 and at 40, so he's another one of those late round 1 predictively when you get into the simulator versus or early round 2 guys. And I thought he was another guy who kind of showed you he was what we thought we were. I don't know that he did anything to move the needle for me other than, oh, he's lean. That was the biggest. If you ask me, my biggest takeaway on Desmond Ritter was he's got a lean build.
Yep. I appreciate his growth throughout the week. Yep. I thought on Tuesday, consensus
bottom quarterback
here, and I think we could all appreciate how he got better throughout the course of the week. But in terms of new information, to your point, Kyle, it's just that he's a little leaner than we thought, and we're happy he has 10 in chance.
Right. Status quo?
Yeah.
Status quo.
Might get some movement on the next one. Carson Strong, quarterback, Nevada.
6'0", 226 pounds, 9.5 in the hands, and 31 5/8 on the arm.
So we had Carson as QB4 coming into this week. He was 37th, so just a handful of spots ahead of Desmond Ritter. Thought what was interesting with Carson was he tried to be aggressive, and sometimes it showcased itself well, but there were other times that I did not think it showcased itself well. And one of the interesting points that was made throughout the course of the week, and folks that, Joe, you and I had a chance to talk to, he was playing on the Jets roster, right?
Yeah.
That Jets offense, in general, a lot of your early primary reads are the underneath routes. The primary read and design and execution is not necessarily to send it, right, and go for it all. And that was the one thing for Carson. I appreciate his ability to throw the football. I appreciate the offense that he played in and how masterful he was of it. But in this environment, I thought there were times where I thought Carson was trying to do a little too much relative to what the expectations were.
Trying to push a narrative, basically. Trying to push it. Hey, I have, we confirm I have the big arm. I could push it downfield, even to the points of him trying to show off his mobility. It just didn't seem, as you stated, looking at the offense, that he played to the offense's strengths, basically. Taking the right routes, throwing up kind of YOLO balls at times that just didn't hit the mark. More underthrows than you would expect for somebody with the arm strength you see on tape. I came away a little disappointed watching him this week.
For those that really appreciate Mac Jones as a quarterback, the overarching comment that people make about that is Mac Jones understands how to operate within the rules of a play. And maybe Carson Strong does. But this week he did not put an emphasis on that at all.
I agree. I think that's he took an approach that didn't match his skill set. I think he came in here with an aggressive, like you mentioned, kind of aggressive mindset, when I think all Carson had to do was play within the confinements of the offense and his physical ability. Like, we don't need you to see scramble for 15, 20 yards, right? We wanted to come in here and see you operate spread offense, dink and dunk the football down the field, and just show that you're accurate. And he kind of pushed it a little too much, but then you kind of expose your limitations also when it doesn't work. So I think it was a roller coaster for Carson on the field and just mentally his approach to the Senior Bowl.
So let's talk about how this changes his perception. We had him as QB4. We had him in front of Ritter and Howell. I thought the projection for both of those guys, or I thought the performance of both of those guys was more steady than Carson.
Yeah.
I do think Carson's got a bigger arm than both of those guys do, but they're both better athletes, and they both give you a dynamic with your legs that Carson just does not. And I know that was something he wanted to showcase this week. It's never going to be a strength of your game.
You don't have medical concerns with either Howell or Ritter.
Correct.
QB6 or QB5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
QB6, because we got
got
Corral in here too.
Well, Corral's in here, but Zappi's not, so it's
Right. So he's going to slide, but we're going to slide him behind Ritter and Howell from a predictive
I
standpoint.
think that's extremely fair.
What kind of strike zone do we want to get him landing in on mocks? I think he's got too much talent to slip too far.
Right.
No, I don't think he's like a Mason Rudolph 3.
Yeah.
But
Like the Drew Lock too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
The Drew Lock, too.
Okay.
We got to coin that
Yeah,
phrase.
well, you have these roadmaps. They already exist. You don't have
Print
to
the
figure it
shirts. Malik Willis, quarterback, Liberty.
6'03", 220, 9 4/8, 31 6/8 on the arm.
We had Malik, QB3, and he was a player who was consistently, from a predictive standpoint, getting pulled in the mocks in the late teens to mid-20s. I think the floor was usually that Detroit pick at the end of the first round. So back half of round 1 projection for Malik. Go ahead.
Will not happen. After this week, he's not going in the teens. And you think about, because you look at the big picture overall, right? Like, this was the beginning of the draft process for Malik Willis. I think it's fairly, I don't want to call it easy, but it's beneficial for him after this. You're talking about a pro day that's going to be a scripted pro day where he gets to show off his big arm. You're talking about he's going to be able to run a 40-yard dash and probably put down a 4.5. So I think that.
Lower than that.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, lower than that. I wasn't giving him enough credit. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was going.
On brand, right?
I was going too high on him, but yeah, I think that it's all in his favor after this. So I think this is a guy that we have to have the conversation of, will he get drafted number 1 now? Because he, like we talked about at the Senior Bowl, we talked about everything and how he was able to continually get better. Joe's favorite phrase, he grew throughout the whole process, and just all of his measurables, and we know how the draft process plays out. So I think this guy has a really good argument for being QB1 now.
If anyone made money this week, it was Malik Willis. And what you said about Kenny Pickett, we wanted him to come in and separate himself. Malik had 2 back-to-back days where basically he was the guy. He was the guy that everyone smiled about. He was the guy that everyone nodded their heads, and some of the throws we were just like, okay, especially being in person, being able to really see it live and hit a thud from his throws.
Yeah.
It was just like, all right, and he wasn't able to even show his legs really. So he did everything he needed to do after a rough day 1. And I'm perfectly fine with literally pushing him up.
After a rough day 1, where I still think he had the 5 best throws of the week on day 1. Also maybe the 5 worst throws, but it's the command as well, right? You can see the arm, you can see the mobility. To me, it was the command, the confidence, the control that he had, his cadence. He was projecting his voice. Like, you had no doubt in your mind who the alpha, who the leader of that group was when he was in there at quarterback. And so it's kind of like an all-of-the-above appreciation for what he was able to get done this week.
Well, and we've had this conversation a lot, and it's kind of coming full circle versus a lot of the questions that we've been wrestling with how we're going to sort out these quarterbacks. What moves the needle for a young quarterback when they get in the NFL? Elite traits, right? You got to have something that you can call on while you learn the ins and outs of operating the position in the offense at a super high level. This dude's got two of them. He's got a cannon, and he's going to run 4.4 or high 4.3. Like, from a traits perspective, now you got to be careful the environment that you're putting him into and the expectations you're going to ask of him early on. But I don't know how you don't look at his resume, look at the young quarterbacks that step into the league and immediately have success and see that one-to-one correlation and say, this, if we're going to bet on a guy that's going to end up hitting, like Malik, I think has the best chance because he has the best raw traits. And that is something that matters in today's NFL at the quarterback position.
And the concern is that he had uneven tape at Liberty. But Kyle, you can point to the reasons why that's true,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And I think it's important to identify the tempo that they played with, the failure to accentuate a lot of his strengths, and the supporting cast. He wasn't in the environment for him to be the best version of himself and showcase the entirety of his skill set. Now he's, just in the first sampling of him being removed from that with a good supporting cast, with coaching, with some concepts that I think are going to play more into what he can do, you've already seen a step. Now let's give him an offseason with a NFL offense with NFL players and see how much better this guy can be and what he can mean to his offense.
And that was something that really popped, was just his drops, like his footwork.
Yes.
From, like, getting used to under center.
Yes.
Now, maybe not actually being under center. We'll see if he does it in the game on Saturday. But, getting under center and taking that traditional 5-step drop with a hitch at the top and throwing those throws with the velocity and the comfort that he did, and that was not something that he did, right? It was a pistol, shotgun, the drops look good, the feet look good, and it's like just continue to stack on that by giving him more and more and more, and he wasn't asked to do these things, but that's the big challenge in scouting is he capable of doing these things? And I don't think there's any question he's capable of doing it all.
I agree. I was going to say, and for Malik Willis, timing is everything. And we've seen this equation work with the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Like, our big comp over the offseason was Jalen Hurts. Just because from from height, weight measurements, we like, okay, they're similar players. And you've seen Jalen Hurts just take his team when he was put in positions to where he can succeed. He took the Eagles to the playoffs this year. So now the Eagles, instead of having to trade 3 first-rounders for a quarterback, they're sitting in a position where they have a quarterback and they have 3 first-round picks. So I think just what Jalen Hurts was able to do the year before, and we know the NFL is that you have to kind of show me first, and before they step out of the realms of believing in certain quarterbacks and measurements and stuff like that. Now I think teams will be like, okay, this guy can definitely be a franchise quarterback because we've seen it this year with Jalen Hurts.
As Kyle said, he has the raw ability, the raw tools, the physical attributes. Those are things you can't coach. Those are God-given talents, right? But from neck up, you can coach that. You can teach that. You can get better at that. You can't teach a guy that can't run to run a 4.3. That's just not going to happen. So with his physical ability, get him in the right opportunity. We saw that with Dan Campbell, him taking that coaching and getting better. That's the guy I want to bank on.
QB1?
Yes.
Yes.
QB1?
Yes.
QB1?
Yes.
QB1.
Me and Joe hesitant because we still Kenny Pickett in the back. We still got.
Listen, you're allowed to have more than one good quarterback prospect. It doesn't have to be shade on Kenny if you go that route.
When you make it very practical and you say, I have to pick a quarterback that I'm going to hitch my wagon to that I think can really be a difference maker at the position.
Because if you don't have
Malik.
that, if you don't have that guy, you're going to wait 2 years and you're going to say, "Oh, gee whiz, I need a guy that can make a difference."
There's a glass ceiling here. This is as good as it's going to be. Congrats on 9 wins. Malik's that guy that can elevate your football team and gives you the best chance to enter into that tier where you got a dude at the position.
Right.
Yeah.
Key is you see the talent, harness it, nurture it, mature it. That's the job of the coaching staff, but he's the guy that you want.
Well, apologies to Bailey Zappi for having to follow that act.
Yeah.
But we do have Bailey Zappi as the last quarterback on the Senior Bowl roster for us to kind of course through. So, Joe, measurements for Bailey Zappi, please.
6'003", 213, 9 6/8, 3.128 in the arms.
We had Bailey coming in at 220 on the predictive board. I think that's kind of the right spot.
I think Bailey Zappi is one of those guys that is a perfectly fine player that if you're willing to draft guys to be a backup quarterback, this is the player you look for in that 5th round range that you feel like is going to mesh well with your group, right? You're not worried about this guy coming in and feeling slighted that he's not going to be your starter or you're, competing really for the job. He's going to be perfectly fine, willing to learn. And I think he can offer your team a baseline level of play that can hopefully keep your offense's head above water. But there's nothing physically special about him that's going to move the needle that gives you any inspiration that he's a starting quarterback. And I don't think he's a Gardner Minshew type player where you say, okay, yeah, we got a little something here that's...
He's got that little extra... Gardner's got that little extra flair to him.
Right.
A little bit of off-script type stuff.
Right.
And I just didn't see that potential with Bailey.
No.
So
Limited player.
We're comfortable with leaving him where he's at, status quo?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
That's going to do it for our quarterback discussion. We really hope you guys enjoyed as we are coming out of the 2022 Reese's Senior Bowl. Kyle Krabs, Keith Sanchez, Damian Parsons, Joe Marino. Make sure you visit the Draft Network for all of your college football, NFL, and NFL draft wants and needs.